The ship nosed through the morning fog like a dull knife, its hull grating against the barnacled stones of the Bravosi quay. Ropes were thrown, curses traded in half a dozen tongues, and gulls shrieked as if they alone were offended by the city's smell of tar, salt, dead fish, and old secrets. Arya Stark stood at the prow with her hands tight on the rail, watching the Titan's shadow vanish behind them. She had watched that colossus once as a frightened girl named Arya, clutching a sword too big for her hand and a list too long for her heart. Now she watched as Arya Stark of Winterfell, who had worn more names than she had years and killed so many men that the number was only a shape in her mind, not a tally. She was older than the last time she stood here. Not in years, those could be counted on fingers, but in lives, in ghosts. She felt them sometimes when she woke, the weight of other people's breaths still in her lungs, other people's fears rattling behind her ribs. Men who begged for mercy, women who lied with smiles, boys who had grown half a beard and thought it made them men. They were the faces she had worn, the lives she had borrowed before she ended them. The sea wind knifed through her cloak. She breathed it in as if it were a draft of something sharp and clean. It smelled of the past and of something she hadn't yet named. The captain shouted, men hurried, and Arya moved lightly down the gangplank, boots hitting familiar stone. Bravos rose around her in crooked layers, all damp alleys and leaning arches and bridges whose stones remembered 1,000 hushed conspiracies. Her feet knew the way even though she hadn't walked these streets in years. The city folded around her like a hand swallowing a coin. The house of black and white was waiting. She did not go straight there. That would have been too much like a supplicant returning to temple, and Arya was no supplicant. She was a girl who had once washed corpses and swept floors and learned to smile as she slit throats in darkness. She wanted to see the city first, to taste it again on her tongue, to feel whether she still belonged to it or it to her. So she walked. The Ragman's Harbor, where pennants snapped from the masts of ships from Lys, Volantis, Old Town, and ports she didn't know the names of. The fish market, where knives flashed and scales flew and women shouted prices more fiercely than sellswords bargained blood. The green-black canals where the water lay slick and still, reflecting a sky as pale as dead eyes. She passed a man she had once pickpocketed as a hungry child and felt the memory ripple through her like a stone dropped into a deep pool. He didn't recognize her, of course. Why would he? That had been one of her first lessons. People only saw what they expected. A filthy child. A nameless girl. No one. She was not no one. Arya turned down a narrow alley that smelled of damp wool and garlic, crossed a bridge no wider than her shoulders, and came, almost abruptly, to a quiet square of crumbling stone. The noise of the city faded like a curtain falling. Before her loomed the house of black and white, its doors half in shadow, the forgotten faces carved around its archway worn smooth by time and Bravosi fog. Her heart beat faster. She did not like that. "Are you afraid?" she muttered, under her breath. "I am not afraid," she answered herself, just as quietly. She mounted the steps, feeling the old stone beneath her boots. She remembered climbing these same steps barefoot, a skinny waif with lice in her hair and too long sleeves. Ghosts walked with her, her own. The girl who had eaten pigeons raw. The girl who had learned to lie and make the lies into new skins. The girl who had been blinded until she could see better than ever before. At the top, she laid her hand against the wood. It was cool and dry and utterly indifferent. "You left," a voice said behind her. Arya did not start. She turned. The man who stood at the bottom of the steps wore a brown cloak and a face she did not know. Middle-aged, handsome in the way that could vanish if you blinked. His eyes were the color of old coins. There was a kindness to his mouth that she did not trust at all. "Jaqen Hagar," she said, his lips curved. He climbed the steps with easy grace, as if his feet hardly touched the stone. With every step his face altered, not visibly, but in the way light fell on it, in the way the eye wanted to slide off and forget. By the time he stood before her, the stranger's handsomeness had become a memory and his presence was simply there, like a shadow at noon. "A girl remembers," he said softly. "Many forget. The sea eats names, the wind eats promises. Death eats all things. But a girl remembers. Arya's jaw tightened. I am not a girl. He cocked his head, studying her. Then what is she? Arya Stark of Winterfell, she said. The name felt like a blade sliding back into its sheath. Right? And more than that. A flicker touched his eyes. Amusement, or something older. And yet she knocks at the door of the many-faced god, he said. Why does Arya Stark of Winterfell come back to a place where there are no Starks and no wolves? There is only the gift. He spoke gently, but the words laid knives along her spine. She remembered another doorway, another man, another choice. She had turned her back on them once and taken a face that was not given. She had claimed death for herself, not for him. I came to finish what I started, she said. I came for the faces. He watched her, expression mild. She thought about the first time she saw him change, about hair bleaching white and curling, about cheekbones shifting like wax. Back then it had been a kind of magic that made her belly twist with wonder and fear. Now she knew better. The magic was real, but it was not in the trick itself. It was in what the trick allowed. The faces are not toys, he said. They are not trophies. They are a mercy. They are our, Arya replied. Her voice did not rise, but it grew sharper. You taught me that. A face can kill a king, topple a house. One man in the right place at the right time is worth an army. You said that. He looked briefly past her at the carved doors. For a moment, she felt like a child who had spoken out of turn. Then his gaze settled on her again, and all traces of softness left his expression. What a man said to a girl, he murmured, was said to no one. The words belong to him as we belong to him. The faces are his. If they were his, Arya said softly, they wouldn't cry. His eyes narrowed. She should not have said it. She hadn't meant to, but the words were out, and with them came the memory, sudden and vivid, like the sting of a blade drawn across skin. The last face she had worn in Westeros had belonged to a girl from a minor house whose banner she had neither known nor cared to learn. The girl had been a servant, taken in a raid, then sold again until her name lost all meaning. Arya had worn her features to slip through a castle unseen, to murder a man whose bloodline was a long litany of cruelty. It had been a clean kill, a good one, but when the work was done and the face hung in her hands, she had heard it. A sob that wasn't a sound in the air but a pressure inside her skull, as if the skin itself remembered. As if the girl whose life she had taken had not quite emptied out when her blood left her veins. She had thought it a fancy, tired mind, a dream. Then it had happened again, and again. A girl speaks nonsense, Jaqen said, but not as if he believed it. They cry, Arya insisted. You just don't listen. She remembered kneeling in some flea-bitten room with the candles guttering and wind pushing at the shutters, the dead girl's face laid out before her. Remembered the whisper in her mind that was not her voice. They never said my name. She had not even known it then, not until she gave it back to her. I hear them, Arya said, the people whose faces I wear. Not when I take them on. When I take them off, they cling. Pieces of them tattered as spiderwebs. They don't want to go. Some of them don't know how. For the first time, something like unease touched Jaqen's eyes. You lie, he said, but the lie was in his mouth, not hers. She could see it. The house had trained her to see. Do I? She said quietly. Tell me, when you sleep, do your hands ever feel too big or too small? Do you wake up expecting your hair to be long and find it short? Do you flinch at sounds you don't remember being afraid of? His face became stone. The gift is release, he said, as if quoting a scripture. What becomes of a soul after the gift is not for us to know. The many-faced God takes what is his. I don't think he does, Arya said. I think you do. I think the House of Black and White does. I think the faces are caught, and when we wear them, they cling to us. We don't become no one. We become everyone we've ever worn. Most of us just don't notice or we're taught not to. She raised her chin. I notice. He studied her in silence. The city was a murmur beyond the square. The carved faces above the door watched and did not blink. "If it were true," Jacqueline said at last softly, "then the house is not a temple. It is a hoard." "A graveyard," Arya said, "but with the bodies piled on top of the living." She could feel them now, faint as threads brushed against her skin. The freed slave whose face she had taken to kill the Night King's followers in a camp of half-starved men. The Fry girl she had impersonated to poison a hall full of Fry men. The mummer from Bravos, the soldier from the Reach, the sailor from the Stepstones. They were quiet now, but present, like people who had learned not to speak in a foreign house. The house had taught them silence. "What is it you seek, Arya Stark?" Jacqueline asked. Her name in his mouth sounded strange. Harder. "If there are ghosts in the faces." "There are," she said. "Then they belong to the god of death. Not to you. They belong to themselves," Arya said. "They were stolen. He may have taken their lives, but their names are still theirs. Their memories are still theirs. And if I can hear them," her hands curled at her sides, "then maybe I can do more than that." Something flashed through his gaze. Fear. Rage. Awe. It was gone so quickly she could not name it. "You would put yourself above the many-faced god," he murmured. "You would make yourself a savior of souls." Arya thought of her father's head on a spike, of Robb's body with the wolf's head sewn to it, of Catelyn Stark's bloated corpse thrown into a river. The gods had done nothing to save them. "I would make myself their queen," she said. The word surprised even her as it left her mouth. Queen. She who had never wanted marriage and gowns and a hall of banners. But that was a different kind of queen. A trap of silk and duty. A cage. This would not be that. "This is blasphemy," Jacqueline said. "Or a new prayer," Arya said. "You chose me. You gave me the coin, the words. You brought me here. You taught me to be no one." She stepped closer, until she could see the tiny scar at the corner of his left eye. "You thought you could unmake me. You didn't. I learned your tricks. I learned your ways. But I never stopped being Arya Stark. What you made was not no one. It was someone new. Something new." She lowered her voice. "I've worn faces all across Westeros. I've killed lords and knights, slavers and soldiers, men who thought they were untouchable. Now I'm here to take their ghosts off your altar." He did not move, but the air seemed to tighten around them, as if the house itself were drawing breath. "A man could kill you," Jacqueline said calmly. "Here, now, and add your face to the hall. The wolf girl, the stubborn one. A fitting lesson to others who would innovate." "You could try," Arya said. The wind picked at the edge of her cloak. "Behai." Endy those doors lay the soft darkness she remembered. The pool that smelled of still water and stone. The hall where faces waited in rows, as patient as death. She was not blind anymore. She was not learning. She was done learning. She was here to take. "If you think I came unprepared," she said, "you never knew me at all." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Very well, Arya Stark," he said. "If you would be queen, you must first pass judgment. Come, see what you claim to rule." He turned and pushed the doors open. The house of black and white yawned before her like a throat ready to swallow. Arya stepped inside. The air was as she remembered. Cool and still, tasting faintly of stone and old prayers. Candles burned in alcoves, their light subdued, neither welcoming nor hostile. The statues of a dozen gods loomed in their shadows. The Lion of the Night, the Stranger from the Seven, the Black Goat of Qohor, the Weeping Woman. All faces of the same god, they had told her. All masks worn by death. She wondered now if that had ever been true, or if even gods wore stolen skins. Footsteps whispered in the near distance. She heard the scrape of a broom, the soft sound of cloth on stone. Somewhere water trickled. The house had its own heartbeat. Jacqueline moved ahead without turning, his brown cloak brushing the floor. He led her past the pool where visitors came to drink the gift, past the hall where supplicants knelt in the dark and begged to be spared or to be taken, past the place where she had once laid out bodies and washed their cold limbs. It was all the same, and it was not. "You feel it, don't you?" she said as they walked. "You always have. You just pretended you didn't." He did not answer. They passed into the long hall. Here the candles burned lower, or perhaps the shadows were thicker. The walls of the chamber were not walls, not really. They were shelves, and the shelves held faces. They were hung like empty masks, like leather stretched and cured and ready for a craftsman's hands. Old, young, pale, dark, scarred, smooth. Men, women, boys, girls. Hundreds, thousands. The first time she had stood here, she had felt so small that she might vanish between heartbeats. Now she felt something else. She felt them looking back. Arya stopped. The air thrummed. Not with sound, not exactly, but with attention. It was like walking into a room of people who had all been waiting for her. 1,000 held breaths. Her skin prickled. "Hello," she said quietly. It was not quite madness. She had known madness in the flick of a man's eyes after too many days without sleep, in the muttering of a woman who had lost all her children and yet kept rocking an empty bundle. This was not that. This was presence. It gathered around her like smoke. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then something brushed against her mind. A whisper with no words. A pressure behind her eyes that was both too much and not enough. She took a breath and let it out slow. "You don't have to hide," she murmured. "Not from me." She thought of the girl whose face she had last worn. How she had sat alone with that skin in a dim room and listened, really listened, until the sob resolved into a thought. Not a clear one, not then. Just pain and bewilderment, tangled like hair. She had followed the thread down into the dark and found a name waiting there like a stone at the bottom of a well. Yeah, she had spoken it aloud. The face had seemed to shiver. Now she did the same thing, but this time she did it with all of them. Arya closed her eyes. She shut out the candlelight, the smell of stone and tallow, even the faint sound of Jackeen's breathing behind her. She reached, not with her hands but with whatever part of her it was that had learned to be both Arya and Cat of the Canals and the blind girl in the alley. The part that knew how to slip out of her own skin and into another. The faces were empty, they had always said. They were just skins, just tools. She reached into the closest one, felt like thrusting her hand into water just above freezing. She gasped, teeth clenching, as something closed around her wrist. No, around her mind. Presence, a remnant, pattern. She could feel the echo of the man's final fear, the way his heart had hammered when he realized the wine was poisoned. The love he'd had for a girl who would never know why he did not return. The way his fingers had always ached in winter where he had broken them as a boy. Names, dates, flashes, fragments. They flooded her. She might have drowned in them. She should have. But she had learned to fight in rivers as well as in dark halls. Arya braced herself and pushed deeper. She let the man's fear wash over her and through her without letting it settle. She took his memories and smoothed them like cloth. "I see you," she whispered. "I see you. You were more than this. You were." His name rose up, thick and heavy on her tongue. She tasted salt and cheap wine. Ryan. The pressure eased. She felt something loosen, like fingers unclenching. The cold receded. When she opened her eyes, the face hanging before her looked somehow lighter, less burdened. The lines of anguish around its mouth seemed softened, though she knew that was impossible. "You speak names that should be forgotten," Jackeen said, voice tight. "They should be remembered," Arya said. "They've been forgotten long enough." She moved to the next face. This time she did not close her eyes. She reached, and the presence came quicker, as if the first had opened a door and now the rest pressed closer. A girl who had dreamed of seeing the summer sea and drowned in a well instead. A priest who had lost his faith in the instant his god did not answer. A boy who had stolen bread and been hanged for it. Their memories flickered through her, quick and bright and hot. It was too much. It was intoxicating. Every life was a world. Every stolen face held a sliver of that world trapped like a fly. In amber, And she was the flame that could free them. The hall shuddered around her with all those nascent voices stirring. "Stop," Jacqueline said sharply now. "You do not know what you do. You will break yourself." "Maybe," she said. Her fingers brushed the cheek of an old woman's face, its wrinkles deep as riverbeds. "Or maybe I will make myself." She did not stop. She moved down the row, not touching each face but enough to feel the pattern of them. The house had always told her that faces were tools, masks, a way to become no one. But they had never told her that to wear one was to take into herself the echo of its owner. That every time she slid a new skin over her own, she added another layer to herself. No one, everyone, all those lives she had worn and cast aside, they had not left her. They had thinned, quieted, but they were still there, like fading scars. Now, as she reached for the hall's store of dead, they stirred. Voices rose in her mind. Some were whispers, some shouts. 100 tongues, 1,000 accents. She could not pick out words. She did not try. She let them crash over her like a storm at sea. Then gradually, through force of will sharpened by years of stubbornness, she bent them. Not with love, not with cruelty, with purpose. "You are not mine," she told them, "but you are with me. I will not be your God. I will be your blade." It was not words, but intent. Still, it worked. The storm subsided to a fierce wind at her back instead of against her face. She swayed, knees wanting to buckle, but she stayed upright. "I thought," her voice came out hoarse, "I thought I would free them by sending them on, by finding their names and letting them go. But they don't want to go. Not yet. There's something left undone in all of them. A mother not avenged, a child not saved, a debt not paid. The house took their deaths and their faces, but it never gave them the rest of what they wanted." Her heartbeat thudded. "I can give it to them." Jacqueline stared at her as if seeing not a girl, not a woman, but something that had no place in any of his training. "You would bind them to you," he said. "You would forge a crown of ghosts." "Yes," Arya said simply. "I would. That crown will crush you. Then I'll be crushed." She turned from the wall at last, the echoes of 100 lives humming under her skin like hot wine. "The difference between us is that you think I'm afraid of death. I'm not. I've looked at it since I was little. I've stabbed it in the heart. If it takes me, it takes me. But first, I'm taking something back." "What?" "Choice," Arya said. "Names. Faces that belong to themselves. Death belongs to your God, but life belongs to the living." For a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing. "You cannot stay," Jacqueline said at last. "The house will not allow it. The others," his mouth tightened, "they cling to old ways. They barely accepted you once. What you propose is heresy. Open war with all we are." She thought of the first time she had disobeyed them, of Waif's staff cracking her ribs, of beatings taken in darkness, of blindness and hunger and stubborn endurance. She thought of how many times she had risen when they tried to push her down. The wolf inside her had never stopped snarling. "Then we are at war," she said. He looked at her for a long time, his face utterly unreadable. "A man could betray you," he said eventually. He could call the others now. They would come in the silence between heartbeats, and Arya Stark would die before she could draw a blade. The house would take her face and hang it on the wall, and all she is would be a warning to others. "You could," she agreed. "Will you?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if in prayer. When he opened them, they were tired in a way she had never seen. "I chose you once," Jacqueline said. "A man does not unmake his own work so easily." He stepped back. "Go," he said. "Leave this place. Leave Bravos. If you truly hear them, then you do not need the house's hall of faces. You carry enough of us already. The city will not hold your weight for long." Arya hesitated. "Come with me," she said. The offer surprised her as much as him. Yet it was there, in her mouth, tasting of iron and snow. For all his secrets and evasions, he had been her teacher. part of her still wanted his approval. Another part knew she would never get it. His smile was small and sad. "A man is no one," he said. "No," Arya said softly. "You aren't." She did not know his true name. Maybe no one did anymore. Perhaps even he had forgotten. But she saw, for a heartbeat, the boy he must have been once, long before he became a faceless man. A boy who had chosen this life or been forced into it, and who had learned to quiet his ghosts instead of listening to them. She turned away. On the way out, she paused at the pool where supplicants came to drink. The water was still, its surface a black mirror. She saw herself reflected there. Not the little girl who had once knelt in this temple. Not the blind beggar. Not cat of the canals. Arya. Her own face, lined slightly at the eyes, sharpened by grief and resolve. But behind her own eyes, she saw others. A woman with a scar across her lip, a boy with a broken nose, a sailor with a tattoo of a kraken on his throat. They flashed by like ripples crossing the surface. "Will you drown us?" One of them whispered, from somewhere inside her. "No," she said. "I'll give you something to live for. Revenge," another voice hissed. "Justice," Arya said. "Is there a difference?" A dozen voices, overlapping. "Sometimes." She straightened. "Enough for now." She walked out of the house of black and white without looking back. Outside, Bravos was bright and harsh after the houses dim. The square seemed smaller, the city louder. Life surged around her. Vendors calling, ships groaning, a child laughing as a dog chased his heels. Arya felt the ghosts behind her eyes and he wind on her face and, between them, a strange, fierce calm. She had work to do. The first name came to her that night in a cheap inn with mold on the ceiling and bedbugs in the mattress. She lay awake on stale straw, watching the shadows, listening to the murmur of other people's sleep through thin walls. Her mind was crowded, yet for all the noise inside, a single thought rose clear as a star over dark water. Walder Frey. She had killed him. She had worn a face, taken a life, and turned a hall of men into corpses with a smile and a toast. It had been the sweetest killing she had ever done, and she did not regret it. But when she had worn the girl's face to do it, she had heard the girl's grief. Frey had bought her with coin and lies and broken her as a man might break a horse. Killing him had not brought her back. It had not even made her death truly matter. Frey was dead, yet the things he had built lived on. Alliances, children, bastards, petty cruelties woven into the riverlands like burrs and fleece. The ghosts inside Arya stirred. "We are not done," they said. She rose before dawn, pulled on clothes that did not belong to any of the faces she carried, and left the inn. By nightfall, she was on a ship bound for Westeros. The crossing was cold and choppy, with waves that slapped the hull like angry hands. Arya sat in the bow, pulling a worn leather satchel into her lap. Inside, wrapped in cloth, lay a small handful of the faces she had taken over the years and refused to return. They were not the house's, not anymore. They were hers. Leah's was among them. So was a merchant's wife from Gulltown, a soldier from the Lannister host, a Lysene courtesan whose beauty had once been spoken of in ballads. She did not put any of them on. It was not necessary. They were inside her now. She could feel Leah's hot, frightened courage, the courtesan's cool poise, the soldier's weary watchfulness. When Arya straightened her shoulders and adjusted her stride, she could become any of them without touching a single strip of flayed skin. It was a new sort of magic, one that did not require a sip from the black pool or a whispered prayer to a god who never listened. It required only that she remember. The ship docked at Gulltown first. The harbor smelled different from Bravos, sharper, with less spice and more rot. Arya did not disembark. She watched the men load and unload, watched a woman in fine green skirts descend a gangplank with a little boy on her hip, watched gulls fight over a scrap of fish. She let their faces settle over her vision like veils, then let them go. At King's Landing, she stepped onto the quay as no one special. A lean young woman with travel-stained clothes, dark hair cropped roughly to her jaw, eyes that slid away when looked at. People glanced past her and did not look twice. Faces and ghosts wrapped around her like a cloak. The city had changed since she had last seen it. The ruins of the September were mostly cleared, leaving only a scorched foundation and a crude shrine built hastily to all the gods and none. New houses rose where old ones had burned. The stench of corpses had faded to the ordinary stink of too many people and too little water. On the hill where the Red Keep loomed, banners snapped in a cold wind. The stag of Baratheon still flew, but beneath it now flew the dire wolf of Stark and the three-headed dragon of Targaryen, each smaller, each vying for space on the same field. Compromise. A lie. Arya's lips twisted. Jon had not wanted a crown. Sansa had wanted hers, but on her own terms. She had sailed away and left them to it, thinking she was done with thrones and their wars. She wasn't. Not if the lives inside her were any measure. Frey's name burned in her mind like a coal. But Walder Frey was dead, and the twins were leagues away. There was another problem first. Another echo that would not quiet. Cersei Lannister. The queen who had ordered her father's head struck off, who had murdered children and called it duty, who had burned the September and laughed at her brother over corpses. Arya had carried her name on her list for years. She had taken it off only when she heard of Cersei's death beneath the Red Keep stones. Crushed by the thing she had built. It had sounded fitting. The ghost in Arya's chest disagreed. She felt it, sharp and bitter. Not one of the Braavosi faces. Not Lya, not Ryan, not any of the others. This was older, deeper. It was the part of Arya that had watched her father die and sworn, in the searing silence after his head hit the ground, that she would kill Cersei Lannister with her own hands. I was robbed, that younger self snarled now. She died in the dark with no blade at her throat and no eyes on her. She escaped. Arya stopped in the middle of a crowded street. People jostled her, cursed, flowed around her like water around a rock. "She's dead," Arya whispered. "Not by you." She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing shallowly. "Then what would satisfy you?" she asked herself. "Dig up her bones and stab them?" "Yes," said the echo. "Then no. Then something else harder to name." It wasn't enough that Cersei was dead. She had to be answered. The harm she had done rippled through 1,000 lives. Arya could feel some of those lives now, sharp as glass. The baker's boy who'd been chased and beaten at Joffrey's whim. The mothers who'd watched their children starve during the siege. The people burned in the September, their prayers turned to screams in an instant. A crown of ghosts, Jaqen had said. If she listened, they told her what they wanted. Not justice as courts and kings understood it. That had never been justice. What they wanted was a story, a meaning. If Cersei's end was to be stones and darkness, then let there be something done in her name that cut the other way. Arya raised her head. There was a brothel in Flea Bottom where a woman known as the Lion's Mistress had once sold information along with flesh. See, Cersei had used women like her, bribed them, silenced them, had their children killed when it suited her purposes. Those women had learned to live in fear of gold lions on red cloaks. Now the lions were gone. The cloaks had other sigils. But fear had memory. Arya found the brothel easily. The door had a new coat of paint, gaudy red that stained the hand of anyone who touched it. Inside, the air was thick with cheap perfume and old sweat. A tall woman with painted lips and tired eyes sized Arya up as she entered. "We don't get many up from the docks at this hour," she said. "You lost, little bird?" "Looking for someone," Arya said. She let Leah's timidity soften her shoulders, made her voice a fraction higher. Ghosts moved through her, adding color to her performance without taking it over. "They call her the Lion's Mistress." The woman's gaze sharpened. "What for?" Arya smiled, and let the smile be partly the Lysene courtesan's, partly her own. "Business," she said. In the end, it was not so hard. Gold still talked in King's Landing, and whispers still moved faster than ravens. The Lion's Mistress had not retired. She had reinvented herself, as women like her always did, and now managed half the brothels on this side of the city along with a modest web of informants. She had children at court and in the kitchens, in the city watch and in old households that had survived the war by bending with the wind. Cersei had taught her how to wield fear. Arya taught her something else. She did not kill the woman. That would have been simple and pointless. Instead, Arya sat across from her in a private room with the shutters barred and the lamps turned low. She watched the woman's hands, the way they fluttered to her throat when Arya said the words Queen Cersei, the way they tightened into fists over regrets not spoken. "You survived the lion," Arya said quietly. "You helped her. You hurt people for her and you watched her hurt more. But you didn't die with her. You're still here. That means you have a choice." The woman's laugh was brittle. "Choice? Is that what you call this?" She gestured at the bare room, the thin walls, the sound of muffled music and men's voices far below. "I call it clinging to the edge of the sky cell. You could let go," Arya said. "Fall. Or you could climb." "How?" Suspicion sharpened the woman's eyes. "You come here asking questions about a dead queen, and now you offer me what, salvation? You're not a septa." "No," Arya said. "I'm worse." She let her face loosen. Not with flesh. She did not need to change her features. She let her eyes shift instead, the way she held herself. Let the ghost of the courtesan overlay her posture. Then the soldier, then the blind girl, then the child who had watched her father die. For a heartbeat, the woman across from her saw not one person but many flickering through the same skin. The woman went pale. "What are you?" she whispered. "A reminder," Arya said, "of all the people Cersei harmed, of all the lives twisted up with hers. She's dead. You're not. So here's your choice. You can keep playing her games, trading in fear, using people the way she did. Or you can break that chain. Take the coin you have, the secrets you have, and use them for something else." "Like what?" "Food in empty bellies. Doors locked against the wrong men. Girls warned before they walk into rooms they can't escape." Arya's jaw clenched. "Truth, when lies are easier. And why would I risk all that?" the woman demanded. "Because you say Cersei wants it? She's bones under rock. She doesn't want anything." "You do," Arya said. The woman flinched. She could not hear this woman's ghost. The woman was not dead, but she could feel the weight of lives around her, the currents that had brought her here. Cersei's shadow still lay long over this city. To answer that shadow, it was not enough to kill. She had to change the shape of the fear it left behind. "Cersei is gone," Arya said, "but what she stood for doesn't have to be. You can bend it, use it. You were her knife once. Be someone else's shield. And if I say no," Arya's smile was thin, "then you'll see me again, and I will remind you of everything you ever did for her, until you can't sleep without hearing the names of those you hurt." She leaned forward. "I can live with your fear. Can you?" The woman stared at her, throat working. "Who are you?" she whispered. Arya thought of a dozen answers. None of them fit neatly. "I'm what comes after," she said. She left money on the table, not as a bribe, as proof. As she walked away through King's Landing's noisy streets, she felt something shift inside her. The echo of the younger Arya, the girl who had sworn revenge, quieted slightly. Not gone, not yet, but eased. The ghosts from the September, from the burned streets, from the long years of Cersei's rule. Some of them murmured approval. "This is not enough," one of them said. "But it is a start." "It's all I can do," she murmured. "Not all," the soldier's voice said. "You are going to the Riverlands next." It took months to reach the twins. She did not travel straight. She zigzagged across Westeros following whispers. Of a knight who beat children in his care because he could, of a merchant who profited from false debts and legal tricks, of a minor lord who used the chaos of the post-war years to seize land from small folk too exhausted to fight back. At each stop, she wore faces without skin, borrowing mannerisms and voices from the ghosts inside her. She left people alive mostly, but changed. She left letters, coins, threats that were also promises. The stories spread without her will. People spoke of a woman who could be anyone, who came in the night to those who thought themselves untouchable and set their world on edge without drawing a single drop of blood. A faceless queen, they called her in some places, a demon in others, the wolf of many faces. She heard the names and did know. She claimed them, but she did not refuse them either. When at last she stood on the banks of the Green Fork and looked up at the twins, it seemed almost anticlimax. The castles were smaller than she remembered, less terrifying. Their towers still mirrored each other across the river, but the bridge between them had been partially rebuilt after one collapse and sat unsymmetrical, like a mended bone. Walder Frey's descendants still held the castle, though their grip was less sure. Other houses pressed them, seizing the excuse of past sins to carve away pieces of their power. The Freys bickered among themselves, their inbred rivalries sharpened by dwindling fortunes. Arya could have walked in and cut the heart out of what remained. She had once slaughtered half a hall here. She could do it again, more cleanly, more cleverly. The ghosts inside her knew the ways in. It would be almost easy. She did not. Instead, she came as a singer. The face she wore was invisible. In the mirror of a puddle, she saw only herself. But she carried the memory of a Bravosi mummer whose voice could make men laugh or weep, and she slid it over her like a second skin. At the castle gate, she spun a tale of songs from across the narrow sea, of jests and japes for the Lord's table. The guards, bored and cold, waved her through. Inside the hall, she sang songs of betrayal and broken oaths, songs of guests slain under banners and rivers running red. She spun the story of the Red Wedding in rhymes and jests, putting different names in, flipping the tale so that it was Frey sons who were butchered at their own feast. Laughter rippled through the hall, uneasy, then grew. The new Lord Frey shifted on his chair. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white around his cup. "Enough," he said when she finished. "Sing something else. Something about victories." Arya smiled. She sang of wolves instead. Wolves who lost their home and found it again, who had their hearts torn out and kept walking, who learned to change their shape and slip between shadows. She wove in names no one remembered now, the small folk murdered at the twins, the servants beaten for mistakes, the girls taken to old Walder's bed. She made them heroes in small ways, brave in the moments before their deaths, and she gave those deaths weight in her song. Somewhere inside her, those ghosts stood a little straighter. When the feasting was done and the Lord had gone to his bed and the hall had emptied to embers and snores, Arya moved like a breath of air through the stone. She did not kill the new Lord of the twins. She stood at the foot of his bed and watched him sleep, his mouth slack, his hand twitching as if reaching for something he had lost. She let the weight of all those lives gather in the room like cold. He woke gasping. Her face was in shadow. She spoke with a dozen voices. "You live on the bones of the dead," the ghost said through her mouth. "You feast on stolen bread." The man's eyes bulged. "WH, who are you?" "Guards." "No one is coming," Arya said. "Do you hear them, Lord Frey? The people whose blood bought your roof and your bed? Do you feel them in the stones when you walk?" He shook his head, sweat on his brow. "Ghost stories," he said hoarsely. "Old tales. Walder's sins, not mine. I was a boy. You are a man now," she said. "Do something about them." "How?" he whispered. She told him. She spoke of reparations, of land returned, of a new sept built not to honor the seven or the black goat but to shelter the poor. She told him to set aside a portion of his harvests for those who had lost fathers and husbands to his house's betrayal. She told him to invite bards to sing the truth of what happened here, to keep his shame alive. "And if I don't?" he croaked. Her knife glinted in the dark. "I won't kill you," she said. "Death would be easy. I'll do something worse. I'll give your face to the house of black and white and make sure you never sleep again." He believed her. The next month saw changes in the Riverlands that people argued about in taverns and on roadsides. Some called Lord Frey a coward, bowing to pressure from his enemies with public displays of remorse. Others said he was haunted. They told tales of a woman made of shadows who stood at his bedside and whispered names until he wept. Arya left when it was enough. Not right. Nothing could make the red wedding right. But less wrong. The crown of ghosts on her brow grew heavier. She might have stayed in Westeros for years, cutting and stitching and reweaving the torn fabric of lives with thin threads of justice. There was work enough for 10 lifetimes. But she was only one woman, and the weight in her chest grew with each name she took on. In the north, Sansa ruled Winterfell with a hand as steady as ice and as sharp. In the south, Bran sat a weirwood throne with ravens for crown and roots for scepter. Jon walked the long cold shadows beyond the wall, half legend now even to those who had fought beside him. Arya watched from afar. Sometimes she came close enough to see their faces from the crowd. Once in Wintertown when Sansa came to hear petitions. Once at a new moot of northern lords where Jon stood beside a wildling chieftain. She never let them see her. The ghosts inside her were jealous. They did not want to share her skin. "It's not time," she whispered, when her hand itched to reach out. "I'd bring too much with me." They were still only voices then, still passengers. That changed in the Vale. She had come to the Eyrie because of a name. Not on her list, not from her past. A boy named Tom who had once been a squire, then a knight, then the commander of a handful of men who patrolled the high roads. He had died on a narrow mountain pass in the snows, pushing a wagon free of a rockslide so that children could pass. It was a good death, a brave one, so why would his ghost not rest? Arya felt him as soon as she set foot on the mountain path. A tightness in her chest, a sharp breath that wasn't hers when one of the mules slipped. She had never met Tom. She had only heard of him in a tavern from an old man who could not speak his name without tears. The old man had pressed something into her hand when she left. A scrap of cloth from a torn cloak, blue with the moon and falcon of House Aaron half visible. "Tell him we remember," the man had said. "If you see him, if you see any of them, tell them they're not forgotten." A foolish request. The dead did not listen, except they did. On the narrow path, with the wind howling and snow flurries stinging her face, Arya reached inward, where her ghosts waited. She found Tom's thread among them like a note in a chord, clear and bright and stubborn. "You died well," she told him silently. "It's over." He pushed back, an ache of refusal. There were others he made her feel, others who had fallen with him, their bodies left under the snow, their names not carried back. His was known. Theirs were not. His ghost could not rest while theirs lay unmourned. Arya reached into the cold stone of the mountain. That was new. Until now she had only touched faces, lives tangled up with skin and bone. But there were memories here too, faint, slow, like lichen on rock. The mountain had watched men die. It had felt their heat fade, their blood seep into its cracks. She sank her attention into that stone until she tasted iron and old dust. Then she followed the faint impressions of movement, shouts, pain. She saw, felt, the final stand of Tom and his men. A circle of bodies around a wagon, spears outward, snow turning pink, a cry to hold just a little longer. Their names rose like sparks. She spoke them aloud into the freezing wind, though no one was there to hear. Then she took a knife and carved them into the nearest stone, letters rough but legible. "Now you're remembered," she said, voice raw in the cold. "Go." Tom's presence eased, not gone, but quieter, grateful. Arya staggered under the sudden emptiness. It was like losing a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She realized then that every ghost she carried, every name, weighed her down but also filled her. They were her army, her court, her subjects, her crown. "Faceless queen," she whispered, the words snatched by the wind. "Is that what I am?" "Not yet," someone said inside her. "Not fully." "What then?" "A vessel," another voice said. "A bridge." "A boundary," a third murmured. "Between death and life." It was too much, more than she had ever asked for. Yet she had chosen it step by step, face by face. She had made herself this way. "What happens if I fall?" she asked them. "If I die?" "We fall with you," Leah whispered, "unless you do something else first." "What?" Silence. or not silence, a sense of standing on the edge of something vast. The House of Black and White had one way of dealing with death. A sip from a cup, a body laid out, a face flayed and hung. They believed that was mercy. Maybe for some it was. Arya had stumbled toward another way without understanding it. She had been binding ghosts to herself, then giving them bits of what they needed so they could loosen. But perhaps there was a third path, a way to weave all those threads into something that could stand without her flesh. A shape came to her mind, not a throne, a tree. She thought of the weirwoods of the north, their white bark, their carved faces, their roots tangled deep in the earth and deeper still in time. Those trees drank memories. Bran had told her, once, in that halting way of his, that he could feel every man who had ever died near a weirwood, every prayer whispered into the carved mouths. The children of the forest had built something like what the Faceless men claimed to serve, a vast network of remembrance and forgetting. "We are a different forest," Leah said softly. Arya was a sapling trying to carry the memories of a forest's worth of dead. She would break if she tried to grow alone, unless she grew other trees. The idea took root. She did not fully understand it. She doubted she ever would. But understanding was Bran's gift, and perhaps the Maester's. Hers was simpler. She saw something that needed doing and she did it. When she left the Vale, she did not go west, as her younger self had dreamed. She went north. Winterfell rose from the frost-hardened earth like an old wolf lifting its head. Smoke plumed from its chimneys, banners snapped from its towers, and the godswood at its heart was a splash of dark crimson against snow. Arya approached on foot, hood up, heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with ghosts. The guards at the gate challenged her. She smiled a little at that. When she'd been a girl, anyone with courage and a story could bluff their way in. War had taught Winterfell caution. "I'm here to see the Lady of Winterfell," she said. "And who are you?" She considered lying. It would be safer, simpler, but she was tired of lies. "Arya Stark," she said. They stared. One ran to fetch someone else. A few short, disbelieving minutes later, she was walking through the courtyard where she had once chased cats and clumsily swung wooden swords. Men and women stopped what they were doing to look. Some bowed. Some only stared with the wary curiosity reserved for legends. Sansa stood on the steps of the great hall, wrapped in a cloak of gray wool lined with white fur. Her hair was the color of polished copper in the weak winter sun, braided in a northern style that somehow still looked like a queen's. Her face was older, sharper, marked by lines at the corners of her mouth that spoke of hard decisions. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Sansa came down the steps, slow and careful, as if the ground might tilt. "Arya?" she said. Arya swallowed. "Thought I'd drop by," she said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. Sansa laughed once, a sound that was part joy and part incredulity. Then she crossed the distank between them and pulled Arya into a hug. For an instant, Arya froze. She had not been held like this in... She could not remember. Arms around her, warm, firm. The ghosts inside her shifted uneasily, pressing against the edges of her skin. She forced herself not to pull away. "You're real," Sansa murmured into her hair. "I thought you sailed away and that was it. Another story. Another ghost." "I am a ghost," Arya said lightly, because it was easier than the truth. When Sansa let her go, there was dampness in her eyes she pretended not to see. "Come inside," Sansa said briskly, as if remembering who she was in front of all these watching eyes. "You must be freezing and starving. Old habits die hard." Arya followed her into the hall. They sat by the fire with hot broth and bread between them, and for a little while they spoke of simple things. How the winters had been, who had married whom, which lords were causing trouble this season. Sansa kept circling around the edges of the question, as if afraid to touch it. "What brought you back?" she asked finally. Arya looked into the fire. "The dead," she said. Sansa's brows knit. "Jon," she said quickly, "is something John is John, Arya said. He walks the haunted woods and the haunted woods walk in him. He's as well as he'll ever be. She took a breath. It's others. All the others. She tried to explain how the faces she had worn had left echoes in her. How the house of black and white was a horde of trapped lives. How she had learned to hear them, then to answer them one by one. As she spoke, the ghosts stirred. Some of them were shy of Sansa's clear, assessing gaze. Others pressed forward, hungry to be heard by someone else. Sansa listened, not interrupting, not laughing. When Arya faltered, searching for words that would not sound like madness, Sansa simply said, "Go on," in the steady tone of a woman hearing a petition in the hall. When Arya fell silent, Sansa looked away, into the flames. "I don't like it," she said at last. "I don't like that you carry all that alone." "I chose it," Arya said. "Yes." Sansa's mouth quirked. "You always did love choosing the worst path with the sharpest stones." Arya huffed a laugh. "There might be a way to not carry it alone," she said. "That's why I'm here, or part of why." Sansa raised a brow. "Go on." Arya hesitated. It was one thing to carve names into a stone on a mountain pass or whisper vengeance into a Frylord's ear. It was another to propose what she was thinking. "I want to build something like the Weirwoods," she said. "But not just for the North. Not just for one god. For everyone." Sansa's brows drew together. "You want to carve faces into more trees?" "No," Arya shook her head. "Faces are part of it, but not all. The trees are anchors. They drink memories through their roots. I can feel that now. When I was near one, before I sailed, I thought it was just my own past I felt. But it's more. They're like the house of black and white, but older, less twisted. They remember without trapping." She flexed her fingers in her lap. "I've been trapping without knowing how to let go, except in pieces. I want to build." She groped for the word. "A place," she said finally. "Many places, where the dead can be remembered properly. Where their names can be spoken and their ghosts can gather without having to live inside someone like me. I want to take what I've learned and plant it." Sansa was silent a long time. "And what would you call these places?" she asked eventually. "Not temples," Arya said. "I don't care about gods. Maybe halls, like the house but open. Places for stories. For names. Graveyards," Sansa said. "More than that. Graveyards remember bodies. I want places that remember lives. The things they did. The wrongs done to them. The wrongs they did. All of it." Sansa's eyes were very blue. "And you want to do this here," she said. "In Winterfell. Here and other places," Arya said. "But it should start here, where they killed Father. Where Bran became whatever he is. Where you held the North together when it was coming apart." She hesitated, then added, "Where I learned what being a Stark really means." Sansa smiled faintly. "And what does it mean?" "Keeping names," Arya said. "Even when it hurts." Sansa's fingers tightened around her cup. "You talk about all these ghosts," she said. "All these lives. You've been helping them. Good." Her eyes flicked up to Arya's. "But what about your own?" Arya looked away. "I have work to do," she said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Sansa leaned back, studying her. "You're not well," she said bluntly. "You look strong. You move like something out of an old tale. But there's a hollowness around your eyes I don't remember seeing even when you came back from everything." "I'm full of people," Arya said wryly. "Hard to feel hollow. That's exactly what I mean." Sansa's voice softened. "Arya, you can't carry the whole world's dead on your shoulders. Even the three-eyed raven has roots to support him." Arya's throat tightened. "That's why I need the halls," she said. "If I build them, if I tie the ghosts to them instead of to me, maybe I can put some of them down." Sansa considered this. "And how would you do that?" "I don't know yet," Arya admitted. "But I have to try. If I don't, they'll chew me to pieces from the inside. Then the house will get what it wants." Another face on the wall. And you'll have no halls. No names. Sansa's jaw set. No. If this is what you're going to do, you'll do it right. With help. Arya blinked. Help? Do you think you're the only one who knows how to keep records? Sansa asked, a little tartness returning to her tone. I have scribes, maesters, singers, people whose entire lives are about remembering. You want halls of names? We'll start with one here. You tell your ghost stories. My people will write them. Ing them. Carve them into stone. Arya's eyes stung. You'd do that. You're my sister, Sansa said simply. And these people you carry, some of them are ours. Northerners. River folk. Men who fought for us and against us. If there's a way to honor them, I won't say no. Arya swallowed hard. Thank you, she said. The words felt inadequate. I'm not staying. I know, Sansa said. You're a storm. You blow in and out. She reached across and took Arya's hand. But leave something behind this time. More than footprints. They built the first hall in the old crypts. It was Sansa's idea. The Starks' dead already lay there, their stone effigies watching with blind eyes. Beneath their feet, in a long chamber that had once been used for storage and then forgotten, masons carved niches into the walls. Some would hold bones, brought from battlefields and nameless graves. Others would hold only plaques, the names of men and women whose bodies had never been recovered. Arya walked the hall as it was carved, the ghosts whispering approval. She spoke names to the stonemasons, who chiseled them into the walls. Ryan, Tom and his men, the girls from the twins, the burnt and the hanged, the starved and the stabbed. She told their stories to a young maester with ink-stained fingers, who wrote them down in a book he called simply The Faces of the Fallen. Why faces? He asked once, quill hovering. Because that's how we know each other, Arya said. Names can be hidden, stolen. Faces tell their own stories. He nodded, though she could tell he did not fully understand. That was fine. Understanding could come later. The work had to come first. The first time she pressed her palm against the cool stone of the finished hall, she felt something shift. The ghosts inside her stretched toward the carved names like plants toward sunlight. Go on, she whispered. If you want. Some of them did. She felt Leah uncoil from her heart, threads of her grief and anger trailing behind like the tail of a kite. They slipped into the stone, braided themselves with the memory of her story carved there. Ryan followed, and Tom and others. Not all. Some chose to stay, but enough left that Arya felt suddenly lighter, as if a weight she had grown used to was suddenly gone. She staggered, bracing one hand against the wall. Arya? Sansa's voice came from farther down the hall. I'm fine, Arya said. She laughed, breathless. Better than fine. She straightened. Do you feel it? She asked. Sansa stepped closer, rested her own hand on the stone. She shivered. It's cold, she said. Listen. Sansa closed her eyes. For a moment, there was nothing. Then her shoulders slumped. I hear, she frowned. A song, very faint, like someone humming down the corridor. Arya smiled. That's them, she said. They're not in me anymore. Not all of them. They're in the hall. Sansa opened her eyes. So it works, she said quietly. Yes. Arya's chest ached with relief. It works. She did not stay to savor it. She could not. The crown of ghosts was lighter now, but it was still there, and other places called to her. The Riverlands, the Crownlands, the Stormlands. Across the narrow sea, the slave cities stirred behind their new banners, old cruelties finding fresh excuses. She left Winterfell with a promise on her tongue. I'll send others, Sansa said at the gate, her hand on Arya's arm. Men and women who can listen, who can write. If you can't come back with every name, send them word. We'll carve as many as we can. Arya nodded. She did not say that there would never be enough, that for every name she freed, 10 more would be lost. That was not a reason to stop. Tell Bran, she said, glancing northward. Tell him what we're doing. He'll understand." "I will," Sansa said. "And Arya." She hesitated, then leaned in, her lips near Arya's ear. "Don't forget to live," she whispered. "Not just for them. For you." Arya squeezed her hand. "I'll try," she said. She rode south with ghosts at her back and a hall of stone behind her, the first root of a new forest taking hold in the dark. Word of the Faceless Queen spread in ways she did not intend and could not control. In the Stormlands, they said she walked with lightning in her hair, striking down lords who broke their oaths. In the Reach, they whispered that she sat at the edge of men's beds and weighed their hearts like a god of old. In the Free Cities, tavern tales told of a woman who could be your brother at breakfast, your lover by noon, and your murderer by dusk. She was not there in all those stories, but the fear and hope they stirred did some of her work for her. Men who might have taken pleasure in cruelty paused, thinking of eyes in the shadows. Women who thought themselves powerless tried, sometimes to push back, believing they had a hidden ally. The world bent a little around the idea of her, even where she had never set foot. That too was part of her crown. In time, others came to Winterfell, men who had served in the Golden Company and carried the dead in their dreams. Women who had washed bodies in the House of the Undying. A red priest who had lost his faith when fire showed him too much. They stood in the Hall of Faces and Names and pressed their hands to the stone and felt the humming of distant ghosts. Some of them learned to hear more, to listen. Arya met a few of them briefly in passing. A dark-skinned woman from Volantis who smiled with half her mouth and frowned with the other. A boy from the Riverlands whose dreams were crowded and who had come to the north because he could not sleep anywhere else. She saw the ways their eyes were like hers had been, haunted, stubborn, hungry for purpose. "Teach them," Sansa said when Arya worried aloud, "not to be you, to be themselves with this gift." "A burden," Arya said. "A gift," Sansa repeated. "And yes, a burden. But you've carried it alone long enough." Arya stayed long enough to become a teacher. That was not who she was. She was the knife at the edge of the curtain, the hand that slipped in and cut the knot. Others, steadier, would build the halls, tend the names, weave the stories into the world's fabric. She would keep moving. Years passed. Her hair went streaked with silver sooner than it should have. The ghosts did that, she thought. Or perhaps it was the life she led, riding through snow and sand, crossing seas on ships that should not have stayed afloat. She stopped counting her age. It mattered little to the dead. One night, far from Winterfell, she sat by a small fire in a ruin that had once been a watchtower. The sky above was clear, stars scattered like spilled salt. Her hands trembled slightly as she sharpened needle, the old, familiar rasp of stone on steel soothing. "You're tired," Leah said. "I've been tired since I was 11, Arya said. "More so now," Tom observed. She grunted. "I'm getting old." "Not old," said a new voice. "Worn." She recognized it with a jolt. Jaqen. She hadn't felt him among her ghosts before. She looked up sharply, half expecting to see him sitting across the fire. There was only darkness. "When did you die?" she asked quietly. "At the house," he said. Another face on the wall. Another lesson. She swallowed. "Did they kill you?" "We killed ourselves," he said, and there was something like wry humor there. We could not live in a world where death was not only our God but everyone's. When you walked out, you left a crack. The house tried to seal it with blood. It didn't work. Cracks never do. They become doors. "You sound like a man in a story," Arya said. "Wise after death." "Death clarifies," he said. "You were right. We were hoarders. We stole faces and called it mercy. You are building something different." She stared into the fire. "It's not enough," she said. "It will never be enough." "No," he agreed. "It will not. But it is better." The ghosts murmured assent. "If I die," Arya said slowly, "what happens to all of you who are left? The ones who stayed with me?" "Leah said gently. She did. The halls in Winterfell and elsewhere. There was one now in Old Town, half library, half shrine. Another in Bravos, in a disused warehouse where candles burned for nameless sailors. A third in Volantis, tended by the once-read priest who now called himself Keeper of Names. Those halls could take some of her burden. They had, but she had never fully opened herself to them. She was still the crown, the center. If she let herself fall, really fall, she could push the rest of the ghosts outward in a wave, into wood and stone and water, into stories and songs and written words. She could become not a wall hanging in a temple but a myth spread so wide no one place could trap it. A queen who dissolved her own crown. "You'll be gone," Sansa had said once, when they spoke of this in hushed words in the hall. "Really gone. No coming back. No echoes." "I'll still be here," Arya had replied, touching the stone. "In the names." Now, by the fire, she turned needle in her hands and thought of all the lives she had worn. The butcher's boy who never grew up. The daughters of Fry who never had a chance to refuse their fate. Leah who wanted her name spoken. Ryan who wanted his love known. Tom who wanted his men remembered. Even Jaqen who wanted a different ending for his house. "I'm not ready," she said. "You will never be ready," Jaqen said. "That is why it must be a choice, not a readiness." She lay back on the hard ground, looking up at the stars. Somewhere far away a wolf howled. She imagined it was Nymeria, still running with her pack in forgotten forests. A queen of wolves, ruling without thrones or banners. "Just a little longer," Arya murmured. "There's still work to do." As sleep pulled at her, she heard the ghosts settle around her like a cloak, their whispered conversations comforting in an odd way. They were her court, her people, her burden, her crown. In the years that followed, people spoke of the Faceless Queen as if she were more legend than flesh. In the alleyways of Bravos, urchins traced her sigil on damp stone. A wolf's head wrapped in a veil of empty faces, hoping she would hear their whispered prayers for vengeance. In Winterfell, children dared one another to sleep in the Hall of Faces and Names, saying the queen would come in their dreams and ask them who they wanted to be. In Old Town, maesters debated whether the growing network of memory halls represented a new faith, an evolution of existing cults, or simply a social phenomenon born of post-war trauma. In King's Landing, a man who had once worn a lion's cloak woke each morning and went to a little shrine where he lit a candle for those he had helped kill, because a woman had sat on his bed one night and told him their names until he wept. In Volantis, a former Red Priest wrote a treatise on the nature of souls that spoke of the Faceless Queen not as a usurper of gods but as a necessary counterbalance. "Where there is fire, there must be water," he wrote. "Where there is forgetting, there must be remembering." And in the far north, beyond the wall, there were rumors among the free folk of a woman who walked the white wastes without leaving tracks. Some said she spoke to the dead who lay under the ice and moved their bones when the living would not. Others said she was only a rumor spread by crows to frighten children. Jon Snow never said. When at last Arya stood again beneath the red boughs of Winterfell's heart tree, she was not sure how many years had passed. The Godswood was quiet. The face carved into the weirwood regarded her with its usual sadness. Bran was there, of course. He sat in his chair beneath the branches, his legs wrapped in furs, his hands resting lightly on the wood. His eyes were clouded with things beyond sight. When she stepped into the clearing, he turned his head as if he'd known she was coming. For a long time. "You're heavy," he said. "Rude," Arya said. "I know I've put on a bit, but not that kind of heavy," he said, smiling faintly. "You've always been light on your feet. It's the inside that weighs." She swallowed. "Can you see it?" she asked. "All of them?" "Yes," he said. "Not clearly. You make too much noise. But I feel you like a knot in a net. A very stubborn knot." "You could untie me," she said. "If you wanted." He shook his head. "I untie things that shouldn't be knotted," he said. "You're knotted on purpose. For a reason." She walked to the pool at the tree's roots and looked down. The reflection that stared back at her was lined. Her hair mostly gray now. Her eyes the same shade of stark brown they had always been but deeper, crowded with shadows. Behind her reflection, for the first time, she saw others. Not as distinct faces but as ripples, impressions, like people standing behind a curtain. "I'm tired," Arya said. "I know," Bran said. "There's more work to do." "There always will be," he said. "That is the nature of work, of living." She turned. "What happens if I let go?" she asked. "Really let go. Push them into the halls, into the stories, into whatever web you sit in." He tilted his head. "You'll die," he said. She laughed, shaky, honest as always. "You asked," he said. "And them? They'll change," he said. "Some will dissolve into the bigger patterns. Into the trees, into the halls, into the way people tell stories about them. Others will stay themselves longer, if their names are spoken often. But none of them will be trapped in you anymore." "Will I?" she asked softly. "Be trapped, in a tree, in a story." He looked at her with that distant kindness that had always unnerved and comforted her in equal measure. "You'll be everywhere," he said. "A girl who was once a wolf and a cat and a ghost and a queen. Children will argue about what you really did and what they think you did. Bards will change your ending to suit their audience. Some will get you wrong. Some will get you half right. That's how it works." She grimaced. "Sounds annoying." "It is," he said. "But it's also freeing. You won't have to correct them." She stood for a long time, hearing the rustle of leaves that were not moved by wind. Inside her, the ghost stirred uneasily. "We don't want to die," Leah whispered. "You won't," Arya said. "Not like that. You'll be spread out, safer. I won't drop you all at once if you're not all standing on my shoulders." "We're afraid," Ryan said. "So am I," Arya admitted. Tom's voice was soft. "We trusted you with our names. We can trust you with this." She closed her eyes. "Stay with me," she told them. "Just a little longer. Then go where you like." She stepped forward and pressed her palm flat against the heart tree's bark. Cold shot up her arm, through her shoulder into her chest. Not the simple cold of winter air. A deeper cold, the chill of centuries, of memories layered upon memories. She felt, briefly, everything Bran must feel when he opened himself fully to the weirwood net. Lives flickering past in great sweeping arcs, wars and births and deaths and quiet days when nothing much happened and that too mattered. She pushed. The ghost surged. For a moment she thought it would tear her apart. Names, faces, memories, regrets, hundreds, thousands, rushed out of her, through her arm, into the tree. Some peeled away and slid down into the earth, roots carrying them like messages to other halls, other weirwoods, other stones carved with names. Some shot upward into the branches, into the whispers of leaves that would someday fall on children playing in the snow. She saw brief flashes. Leah's laughter, unfettered at last. Ryan's lover turning toward a window with sudden warmth in her chest and no idea why. Tom's men's names spoken by a boy reading a plaque in a quiet hall. She saw herself, too, in odd fragments. Girls playing at swords who wanted to be her. Boys practicing her trick of slipping behind someone without being seen. A little girl in flea bottoms standing up to a bully and saying, "What are you going to do? Stab me?" That's what Arya of the many faces would do. She laughed through her tears. Some ghosts did not leave. They settled back inside her, lighter now. Yeah, Tom, Jacqueline. Others whose names she had never quite caught. Perhaps they would stay until the very last heartbeat. When it was done, she sagged against the tree. Bran was there suddenly, his chair forgotten, his hand on her shoulder. She had almost forgotten he could move when he chose to. "You're still you," he said quietly. "For now," she whispered. "Long enough," he said. "Long enough to say goodbye properly this time." She smiled, tired and fond and a little sad. "I always hated goodbyes." "I know." She stayed in Winterfell that winter. She told Sansa everything. They sat in the Hall of Faces and Names again, the stone humming differently now, more full and yet gentler. Sansa held her hand when the weight of what she had done threatened to crush her. "You're not dying," Sansa said fiercely. When Arya coughed blood one night, "Not yet. I forbid it." "Bossy," Arya rasped. "It's kept us alive." They argued and laughed and remembered, telling each other stories of old days until the ghosts inside Arya blurred with the ghosts of their own pasts. They walked the Gods' Wood together, two women who had started as girls in a very different world. When the first crocus pushed through the melting snow, Arya stood again before the heart tree. Sansa was there, Bran, a handful of others, Jon, drawn south by a feeling he could not ignore, the maester with ink-stained fingers, the Volantene who had become keeper of names in the north, a little girl from the kitchens who had once fallen asleep in the hall and woken claiming she'd spoken to a queen with many faces. Arya looked at each of them, memorizing their faces. "I thought I'd die. On a road somewhere," she said. "Or on a ship. Or in the dark with a knife in my hand. This is better." "You're not dying," Jon said hoarsely, because he, like Sansa, could not quite accept it. "You're going where I'm needed," she said gently. "Same as always, just further this time." He clenched his jaw. "Thank you," he said, and the words held the weight of the Night's Watch oath and all the lives she'd saved without him ever knowing. "For everything," she shrugged, swallowing. "Least I could do," she said. "You always went where you were needed too." Sansa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're allowed to be a little selfish now," she said. "To go somewhere for you." "I am," Arya said. "This is for me. I'm tired of carrying so many people alone. This way they're everywhere, and I get to rest." She turned to the little girl from the kitchens. "You remember our talk?" Arya asked. The girl nodded fiercely. "I remember all the names," she said. "I'll keep remembering them, and new ones too." "Good." Arya glanced at Sansa. "She'll need looking after." "Of course," Sansa said. "Stubborn little thing. Reminds me of someone." Arya smiled. "Don't let anyone build statues of me," she said. Sansa scoffed. "As if we'd waste good stone," she said. "Your name will be enough. That and the stories." Arya placed her hand on the heart tree one last time. This time the ghosts did not surge out. There were too few left to make a wave. They stood with her instead, inside her, shoulders touching, the way men do before charging a line of spears. "Ready?" Tom asked. She took a breath. "Ready," she said. She thought, in that last moment, of all the faces she had worn, of the girl who had once looked at a list of names and thought that killing them would fix the world, of the woman who had learned that nothing was ever fixed, only stitched and restitched, and that sometimes the best you could do was make sure the worst stories were remembered so they did not happen the same way again. Then she let go. Her heart stuttered, stopped. She did not feel her body crumple. She did not feel the cold stone where she fell. She was already elsewhere, moving along roots and songs, along whispers and ink strokes, along the lines of faces drawn in children's hands and the prayers of women who had lost everything and still lit candles. In Bravos, a girl sweeping the floor of a small hall of faces and names looked up suddenly and smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she could not name. In Old Town, a maester paused in his writing and added a new line to his treatise. There was once a queen with no crown, who ruled not over lands but over memories. In Volantis, the former Red Priest dreamed of a wolf in many skins standing at the edge of a fire, watching kindly. In a brothel in King's Landing, the former Lion's mistress turned away a man who had come to buy a girl too young, and when he threatened her with old favors owed by old lords, she laughed in his face, hearing a voice behind her say, "Good." At the Twins, a child traced the names on a plaque, sounding them out with care, and the hall hummed in quiet approval. And in Winterfell, beneath the heart tree, people wept and then laughed and then, in time, told stories. They told of Arya Stark, who had been many things. A little girl with a wooden sword, a blind beggar, a servant, a killer, a wanderer, a queen without a throne. They argued about whether she had really worn other people's faces or if that was just a metaphor. They composed songs that got half the details wrong. They carved her name into stone. Wherever a name was spoken for the dead whose stories she had carried, she was there. Not as a face on a wall, not as a statue in a hall, but as a thread in a tapestry too vast to ever see whole. The world went on. Wars flared and cooled. New kings rose, new queens, new councils of merchants and priests. Magic ebbed and flowed. Children grew up hearing that if they listened carefully in the quiet moments, they could hear the faceless queen whispering other people's stories in their ears, asking them what kind of life they meant to leave behind. Some shivered and turned away. Some listened. And somewhere beyond the reach of maps and thrones, in the deep places where memory and possibility meet, a girl with a sword named Needle sprinted laughing through a forest of faces that were not masks but stars, each one a life burning clear and bright. She had no list anymore. She had only names and the stories that went with them, and the joy of knowing that as long as someone remembered, no one was ever truly no one again.